Good evening, friends. I'm here to share a summary and synopsis of Chapter 9, Personal Vision versus Authority in Ethical Education Leadership in Turbulent Times by Shapiro and Gross. So I'm going to break down kind of the intro and then go through the case studies for you, and then offer you some questions or some ideas that we can share in the discussion. So in this chapter, I find this chapter very fascinating because we're kind of talking about this idea of personal vision versus authority. At what point do we respect our own ideas and go against what authority thinks? Or at what point do we decide that we need to draw that line? And so there's a kind of line in the sand, and each of us has a different place where that line sits. And so that creates a whole decision making process that makes it challenging for us. So the book kind of talks about the introduction of Adam and Eve and the historical context of the paradox, eating the apple, going against the authority to do what they want to do. And then the book kind of talks about Emma Goldman, early leader in the women's right movement. And she's she creates this idea of civil disobedience and going against the authority to create some power behind women's rights. And so it creates that personal vision versus going against the system or the establishment. Then it talks about JFK, who has a personal vision for his goals as a president, as a leader of the free world. And we talk about the decisions he makes in group authority, so that group theory, to where he's got his team of people and they're all advising him to do this. He feels a certain way about it, but he falls victim to the group authority, and so he kind of gives in and decides to invade Cuba in the Bay of Pigs, which we know how that ended. And then it outlines Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton kind of characterized himself as an outlaw, a lone Western marshal, kind of fixing things, doing things. So he's using his authority to see through his personal vision. And so it kind of creates this whole narrative of different ideas of how we use personal vision to go against authority, or how we use our authority to fulfill our personal vision. One of the quotes that I found interesting was, "We cheer whistleblowers who reveal corporate or government misdeeds, yet we stand by and watch those heroes lose their jobs and sometimes risk arrest while corruption quietly roots itself in its new gardens." And so I kind of think about the George Floyd case. It's most recent case where we can kind of see this personal vision versus authority. Derek Chauvin is a police officer, and he's using his authority and he believes it's his personal vision to root out crime. And he makes a decision. And I always wonder, if I'm in that situation, if I'm watching or if I'm filming that, if I could just sit there and watch this happen. And so it's one of those things where three other police officers sat there and watched this happen while he was killing George Floyd, putting a knee to his neck until he had no more life. And so I always wonder, as a police officer or as a person, if I were to watch this, what would I do? And so how would I, as a white man, confront this personal vision versus confronting authority? And it creates this whole civil disobedience versus conformity. That's kind of the argument, the line in the sand, that we're going to kind of talk about. So we look at some case studies that we go through, and I'll outline these case studies and then pose some questions for you. As we're going through this, I want you to think about, how do we know what is best for people? How do we know what's best for people? What factors can determine where the line is drawn for people? Is it our job to help people see when they have crossed that line? And who holds school leaders accountable for these decisions? So the first case study 9.1, talks about this student's wishes versus faculty advice. So we have JM, who's a high school junior. He excels in all things. He's in honors, history, English, and world language. He wants to be in honors math or pre-calculus. And we have the math department and teachers and chair who are in extreme opposition of this idea, thinking it's going to fail him. He's not going to do well. He's going to struggle. It's going to cause all kinds of anxiety. And then Alden, the school counselor, she is kind of backing JM up, and she kind of feels blindsided by the counselor, or by the math department, thinking that JM is not going to succeed. And so I kind of wonder at this point if we're not pulling in the voices that we need to bring into this discussion. Obviously, there's two sides to this argument, but we need to decide what's best for JM. And I almost think as a high school junior, JM is capable of making his own decisions and deciding what he wants to do. So I almost feel like we need to honor that. I'm curious to hear your ideas and your thoughts about this case. The next case was friend or foe, and we've all kind of been through this situation where a student is cheating, or you hear of people doing something wrong, cheating. Do you report them? So we kind of have this Emily. She's working really hard. She's in a high stress situation, high reward situation, but she's struggling. Right. And so she's not in a good place. And then we have Raina, who's figured out a way to work around that. Raina and her friends who decided to start cheating on some of their assignments to kind of cut corners, to cut out that stress, and to take advantage of the system. So Emily's mom, I believe, handles this in the best situation by offering Emily support and then giving Emily somebody to talk to. And in comes misspelling. And misspelling does a fantastic job of just diffusing the situation and really helping Emily get her feet back under the ground. Um, the question here I ask is, what is this? What is the real root of this problem? Is the school demanding too much for from their students in this high stakes situation? Are we doing our best for our kids if we're demanding such excellence in everything we do, to where they are stressed out and freaked out? Yes, I get it. It's like real life. But at the same time, we kind of have to take a look at the real root of this problem. And the next one, it's revenue versus integrity. And I've got a picture here of the oil companies and their profits, because I kind of compared this story in my mind to what we see happening in the oil companies. So we've got Medgar University, a highly ranked national science and technology school, and it's just the school of all schools. And schools want to be successful. That's how they stay in business, is by getting students in, getting the endowments, having those students go on to be successful, so that they think, oh my gosh, Medgar took care of me. I'm going to send him a bunch of money. And so we've got these schools that are profiting off of that. So they need that money to keep going. And so we've got Aladdin Amaguchi, who's the son of a wealthy Asian gentleman who, I'm going to go to school here, and I'm going to bring a bunch of my friends or my um, people, and we're going to go to school here, and we're going to be successful. And the school's like, great, we're going to make money, because if anybody knows, international students, they don't get a lot of scholarship money. So they're ending up paying full price or close to full price. And that's where schools make their money. So then we have Enos Morgan, and he's a faculty member, and he really is reaping the benefits of this. But it leads us to our paradox. So Ray Pitter is caught plagiarizing a paper, and Ray is penalized or disciplined. At the same time, Aladdin Amaguchi, because they notice these Asian students aren't coming in with as technical writing skills as they should, Aladdin Amaguchi does the same thing. And so we kind of think about, okay, how do we punish Ray, but we don't punish Aladdin, because Aladdin's bringing in a lot of money, son of a wealthy person. And so we kind of think about this whole dilemma. And so the question I would ask is, how do we create an equitable system of discipline? How can we create things that are more equitable so that everyone is receiving that same punishment? Or in the case of equity, how are we scaffolding the different disciplines based on the case itself versus a one size fits all? So then the next one comes to storm warnings, and Robin is stuck with this idea of, should I stay or should I go? Thus the Clash album cover. So she goes to Roland University against her parents' wishes. Hurricane Katrina comes along, and they relocate all the students to Tether State, and so they're in Tether State, hunkered down, waiting for Katrina to pass. The environment is not safe. It creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of anxiousness with the students, especially their first weekend at school. And so we have this whole dilemma of, okay, should I stay or should I go? Should I stay here, hunker down, and be safe? or should I go against the system for my own personal vision so that I can get to the airport and be safe? And so we kind of think about how that all plays out. So that leads me to the question of how do we help people see that conformity might be the safest solution? Sometimes we just need to say, okay, this is not the battle that we need to fight. Let's step back and rethink so that we can keep our sanity and keep our safety. The next one we have Hoop Dreaming. Douglas Dillman is an assistant principal at Robeson High School, and he takes over as assistant principal. And there's the old principal was Richard Dickey Bennett. He built this whole entire system. Great school, 35 years at this same school as the school leader. He retires, and Rhoda Anderson is now the school leader, and Douglas Dillman is the assistant principal. And we have Quincy Hubert Burton, who's a rising basketball star, fantastic player, does all this amazing thing on the basketball court, but his grades are slipping. And he is not eligible for some of the colleges and universities based on his GPA. And so we have this whole dilemma. Okay, kid from the inner city, this is his chance to get out of the inner city. Basketball is his ticket. But in order to do that, we have to bend some rules. And so pressure is placed on by Jerry Newsom to pass, to change his grades. And then Rhoda jumps in and says, yeah, we need to change his grades. Boy, this is a slippery slope if we open up this can of worms. And so I'm curious as how can we best serve students to allow them to have a chance at success? Is there something we can do other than altering grades? That is just a really, really scary proposition that I would not be comfortable doing. But what I would be comfortable doing is let's offer Hubert some tutoring sessions. Let's have him sign some sort of agreement that he will get his grades up within 2 weeks, and then we can take that. But altering grades, kind of scary for me. The next one is hard teaching choice, rural dream versus urban wealth. Ji Wang, by the way, translates to hope. I typed it in just to make sure I pronounced it right, and it means hope. And so I kind of took that in as part of the story. So we have a rural school district with high needs is where he's currently teaching. High reward. Like you're getting into teaching for these situations, helping kids, helping people, making a difference in their lives, becoming that person that really supports them and holds them up. But then Ji Wang gets a offer at an urban school with high prosper. Go to make your money. And so we kind of have to think about how do we determine our values and goals. And actually, this story happened to me a few years ago. I was teaching in St. Louis public schools, where the way they pay their teachers is basically minimum wage for teaching. And I had a chance to go to a more suburban, well funded district, and I have to think about, okay, what's important for me? Yes, it was valuable helping these kids out, but at the same time, Webster kids, they need their help just as much. And so, how do we determine that best path to take? Well, it comes back to hope, and it comes back to what do we hope to do? What does Yuang really hope to do? Does he hope to change lives, or does he hope to be successful? And so that's the kind of the idea that I had behind this one. And so, going through all of these dilemmas, I'm just curious if we could talk a little bit about those. How do we know what is best for people? What factors can we determine where a line drawn is for people? Is it our job to help people see when they have crossed that line? And who holds school leaders accountable for these decisions? Thank you for watching and have a great night.